It was a brisk afternoon when Barron Trump slipped out of the car that had quietly dropped him off a block away from a modest, family-run restaurant. The streets hummed with the usual chatter of midday traffic. Unlike the polished, high-profile venues his family frequented, this place felt hidden, almost forgotten by the city's rush. A hand-painted sign, chipped around the edges, read, "Willow's Kitchen." Barron pulled the hood of his simple sweatshirt over his head, hoping not to draw attention. He'd come seeking a moment of normalcy, just an hour or two where he could be an anonymous customer enjoying a meal. But something in the air seemed off, as if the building itself held a quiet tension. Stepping inside, the overhead bell jingled weakly, announcing his arrival to anyone paying attention. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint aroma of fried onions and warm bread. A scattering of customers occupied mismatched tables, each covered in simple checkered cloths. Posters of old movies hung on the walls, giving the diner a nostalgic feel. Yet a certain weariness lingered in the corners of the room. Barron noticed peeling wallpaper, a flickering overhead light, and a waitress at the far end. Her shoulders hunched in a way that suggested exhaustion more than a long day's work. He briefly wondered if he should pick another place, but something made him stay. Perhaps the desire to see if a smaller, humbler establishment might offer him the peace he craved. He chose a corner booth, near a window where a pale winter sun peeked in. As he settled in, he spotted a man in a crisp shirt behind the counter, presumably the manager. He was talking to the waitress in hushed, urgent tones. Though Barron couldn't catch every word, the man's posture was rigid, his tone sharp. The waitress, maybe in her late 20s, nodded quickly, eyes cast to the floor. Barron sensed tension. He took out his phone to silence it, not wanting to be disturbed. Usually, he'd have at least one security detail lurking, but for this single afternoon, he'd pleaded for some space. Of course, they'd eventually track him down, but he needed a slice of normal life. Just once. The waitress approached him slowly, her footsteps almost hesitant. She clutched a small order pad, pen trembling slightly between her fingers. "Good afternoon," she said softly, forcing a polite smile. A name tag pinned to her uniform read, "Lucy." Barron noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the tightness in her jaw. Something about Lucy seemed weighed down, as if she were carrying more burdens than a simple diner shift should impose. "Hey," Barron replied, matching her quiet tone. "Could I get a menu, please?" She nodded, handing him a plastic laminated sheet. He saw her gaze flick to the side, almost nervously, as though she expected someone to interrupt. He caught a glimpse of bruising near her wrist, faint but noticeable. He decided not to comment, yet. "Take your time," Lucy whispered. "I'll be right back." Then, almost as if she were jolted by an invisible force, she turned on her heel and hurried toward the kitchen. Barron scanned the menu, standard diner fare. Burgers, sandwiches, soups, and daily specials. Nothing fancy, but comforting. He decided on a turkey club sandwich and a hot coffee, though truth be told, his appetite had waned the moment he sensed the tension in the air. A short while later, Lucy reappeared, looking more anxious than before. She glanced over her shoulder as if checking for someone, perhaps the manager, then offered a tentative smile. "Are you ready to order?" she asked, forcing that politeness. "Yeah, I'll have the turkey club. And a coffee," Barron said. Then he paused. "How are you doing today?" It was a simple question, but Lucy seemed startled by it. She blinked, unsure if this was a normal pleasantry or genuine concern. Her eyes shifted again, landing on the manager. She exhaled. "I'm fine," she managed. "I'll be back with your drink." Her footsteps echoed across the worn-out linoleum floor as she retreated. Barron's gaze drifted to the other tables. A middle-aged couple shared a slice of pie, 2 construction workers in paint-splattered clothes sat near the door, and a lone patron scrolled on his phone at the counter. The diner felt subdued, like a place that had once thrived but now struggled to keep afloat. The air of unease lingered, accentuated by Lucy's evident discomfort. A moment later, Lucy returned with a mug of coffee, setting it down. Barron thanked her, noticing how her hand shook slightly. She managed a brief nod before rushing away once more. The manager's eyes trailed her every move, his posture stiff, eyes narrowed. Barron sipped the coffee. It was strong, slightly bitter, but not bad. He leaned back, letting the faint chatter fill the silence. Suddenly, raised voices came from the kitchen. Barron recognized Lucy's voice, tight, anxious, and the manager's angry baritone. Plates clinked, a pan clattered, then a hush. When Lucy emerged again, her eyes were red, as if she'd been holding back tears. She placed Barron's sandwich on the table. "Sorry for the wait," she mumbled. Barron didn't immediately start eating. Instead, he studied her expression. He'd seen stress before. He knew what exhaustion looked like. But this felt deeper. "How long have you worked here?" Barron asked gently, attempting to strike up conversation. Lucy shrugged. "Over a year now. I, recently started taking double shifts. Need the money." Barron nodded, reading between the lines. "Hard times?" She hesitated, then nodded without meeting his eyes. "Rent went up. My mom's health. Not good. Bills keep piling." Barron felt a pang of empathy. While he hadn't experienced this personally, he knew enough to sense real desperation in her voice. Before Lucy could say more, the manager, a stout man named Ben, strode over, clearing his throat. His forced grin at Barron sharply contrasted the fury in his eyes when he glanced at Lucy. "Is everything all right here?" Ben asked, voice dripping with artificial cheer. Barron mustered a polite smile. "So far, yes. Lucy's been very kind." Ben's gaze flickered to Lucy. "Excellent. If you need anything, just let us know." He lingered a moment as if to assert dominance, then retreated toward the register. Lucy gently exhaled, as though relieved to be away from his stare. Barron finished half his sandwich, observing the diner's dynamics. He noticed a pair of construction workers leaving a paltry tip. He spotted Lucy wiping a table, her shoulders still tense, and he saw Ben scrolling on his phone behind the counter, occasionally tossing hardened glares in Lucy's direction. The overhead lights buzzed quietly, an undercurrent to the restaurant's strained atmosphere. After a while, Barron signaled Lucy over again. She approached, pen and pad ready, eyes darting to Ben. "Yes?" she asked softly. Barron kept his voice low. "Do you get breaks? Maybe we can talk for a minute?" Lucy looked confused. "I don't really have time for a proper break," she admitted. "But if you need anything else—" He shook his head gently. "I'd just like to chat." Anxiety clouded her expression. She glanced at Ben, who glared from the counter. "Maybe in a few minutes," she whispered before stepping away to tend to another table. Barron decided to stay, ordering pie and more coffee to justify lingering. While Lucy disappeared into the kitchen, he glanced at his phone. The same swirl of media mentions around his family popped up, but he ignored them. Instead, he refocused on the diner, on that silent jukebox in the corner, on the chipped paint along the wall, on the hush that seemed to follow Lucy like a shadow. When Lucy re-emerged, she set an apple pie slice before him and refilled his coffee. This time, she lingered. "Thank you," Barron said gently. "I can see you're going through a tough time. I don't mean to pry, but you seem unhappy here. Is everything okay?" Lucy's eyes misted, her voice trembling. "It's everything. My mom's medical bills. This job is my only option right now. And Mr. Ben, he piles tasks on me. If I make one mistake, he yells, or worse. Worse? Barron asked, leaning in. She hesitated, then pointed to a faint bruise on her arm. He grabbed me the other day. A wave of anger swept over Barron. Bullying or harassment in the workplace was unacceptable. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to confront Ben outright. I'm so sorry, he said softly. You don't deserve that. Lucy's eyes watered. If I quit, I lose everything. My paycheck, my mom's care. I can't risk it. He knows that. Barron looked around, noticing Ben casting suspicious glances. What if there was a way out? Or a way to make him stop? Lucy shook her head. Who would believe me? It's his word against mine. Barron took a breath. He didn't want to draw attention, but he couldn't just sit back. Give me some time, he murmured. I might know people who can help. Labor rights experts, charities. Let me finish here, then maybe we can talk outside. Lucy gave a slight nod, her eyes filled with fear and a flicker of hope. Barron offered a small smile, then turned to his pie, though he barely tasted it, his thoughts consumed by Lucy's predicament. Eventually, Barron went to pay. Ben eyed him with forced politeness. Barron left a generous tip on the table, but not so large as to raise alarm. Then he stepped outside, waiting near a side alley. Minutes later, Lucy slipped out the back door, hugging herself against the chilly air. I can't stay long, she whispered. He's on edge. Barron nodded. Listen, I'm not just some random guy. My name is Barron. Barron Trump. Lucy's eyes widened, shock flickering across her face. Trump. But why? Why help me? Because you don't deserve to be stuck in a toxic place, Barron said. I have resources, legal, financial. If you want to file a complaint or find a new job, I can guide you. But it's your decision. Tears formed in Lucy's eyes. It sounds too good to be true. I don't know what to say. Before Barron could reply, the back door flew open. Ben stood there, face twisted with anger. Lucy, slacking off again. He grabbed her arm. Barron intervened calmly. Let her go. Ben sneered, releasing Lucy. Don't you tell me how to run my place. Lucy, eyes filled with dread, mouthed a silent apology to Barron before slipping back inside. Ben shot him another glare and slammed the door. Barron's heart pounded. Storming in would only endanger Lucy further. Instead, he took out his phone, texting a contact about labor rights. He lingered on the street for some time, hoping to catch Lucy again. Eventually, the diner closed. Lucy emerged, shoulders slumped, clutching a small bag. Barron approached gently. She looked torn between relief and fear. I appreciate you waiting, Lucy murmured. But I don't want to cause more trouble. Barron offered a kind smile. If you change your mind, call me, he said, handing her a small business card. Nobody should endure what you're facing. She stared at the card, eyes brimming with tears. I'll think about it, she whispered. Then she left, head bowed. Barron watched her vanish into the night, feeling both hopeful and helpless. Days passed with no word. Then, on the third evening, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Lucy. I need help. They met at a neutral coffee shop where Lucy unburdened herself. The bruises, the insults, the fear of being fired, her mother's escalating medical needs. Barron introduced her to a labor rights attorney who agreed to represent her pro bono. He also offered interim financial help for her mother's bills, urging Lucy not to feel ashamed. Though Lucy was anxious, she began documenting every harassing incident at the diner. Ben's behavior intensified, culminating in him physically grabbing her arm again. That final straw pushed her to draft a resignation letter, attaching evidence of abuse. Handing it to Ben, she walked out of Willow's kitchen with trembling determination. Ben threatened to ruin her, but Lucy kept going, heart-pounding, tears blurring her vision. Barron waited outside, offering quiet support. In the weeks that followed, an internal investigation began. Faced with potential legal repercussions, the owners dismissed Ben. Meanwhile, Barron discreetly found Lucy a new job at a friend's cafe, better hours, respectful co-workers, a chance to reclaim her dignity. She could finally support her mother without sacrificing her self-worth. Though challenges remained, Lucy no longer woke each day dreading her shift. She also discovered she had a knack for baking pastries, receiving compliments from customers who left generous tips. One evening, Lucy called Barron to say she'd saved enough to handle her mother's next treatments herself. "I wish I could repay you," she said, voice trembling with gratitude. Barron assured her she already had, by escaping a toxic situation and safeguarding her future. "If you ever see someone else in need, do the same for them. That's payment enough." Lucy vowed to pay forward the kindness she received. Willow's kitchen underwent changes after the scandal, vowing to monitor employee welfare more closely. Though Lucy never returned, her story quietly circulated among the neighborhood. People whispered of a mysterious benefactor who'd intervened. Only Lucy and a handful of close friends knew the truth, that Barron Trump, craving anonymity, had stumbled upon her suffering and decided to help. Barron returned to his day-to-day life, but he carried Willow's kitchen in his memory. Whenever he found himself in a small diner or cafe, he'd observe the staff, watch for signs of trouble or fear, because he'd learned something invaluable. A simple act of compassion could set someone on a path to freedom. Lucy's transformation from trapped waitress to a hopeful, confident individual reminded him that it doesn't take a grand gesture, just the willingness to reach out. And so, Lucy found a fresh start, and Barron discovered yet again that not every moment of anonymity is spent in solitude. Sometimes it becomes an opportunity to change a life. In a world full of loud headlines and even louder opinions, a quiet kindness can resonate more deeply than anyone expects. For Lucy, it changed everything. For Barron, it was a reminder that real strength lies in empathy, and that one conversation can tilt the scales toward a better horizon for us all.